Hi, I'm Kristen. Welcome to the 8th day of the 12 days of QuiltMiss. If you don't know what that is, it's basically just a kind of collaboration sewing challenge, quilting challenge thing that I'm doing with 11 other YouTubers. So there's 12 of us. So yesterday, day 7, was April from April's Craft Room. Go check that out if you haven't seen that one. And I'll put links to everyone who's involved in the description. And I'll let you know at the end who's coming tomorrow as well. But anyway, basically what it is we've all sent each other a Christmas fat quarter and challenged each other to make something to give away to one of our subscribers. So something Christmassy. It doesn't have to be a quilt, but a lot of us are making quilts. I've made a quilt. So that's what I'm going to show you today.
Okay, so these are the fabrics I'm working with. This is the one that I chose, kind of a tartan Christmassy, but also from Scotland, since some of this fabric was getting sent to the States and things like that. And then these ones from other folk. If you've been watching the other channels who are taking part in QuiltMiss, you'll have seen some of these fabrics before, used in different ways. So this is what we're working with. So we're gonna try and make some Christmassy loveliness with that.
So I know I'll be a bit strange among quilters in that getting a bundle of fat quarters, which is essentially what this is, makes me a bit nervous. Now, plenty of people would be nervous with the random mix of these fabrics. That's probably not strange, but for me, even just the fact that they are fat quarters, that they're like a relatively large size of fabric that needs to be cut into, makes me go, because I'm used to scraps or little bits or remnants. I love working with scraps and reclaimed fabrics. That's my happy place. Anyway, so I struggled with this for a bit and I had to really think about what I was going to make with them all. So as luck would have it, an elf got sent to me from Canada. My stepfather came all the way from Toronto for a visit, and he's really good at just brainstorming, throwing kind of ideas off of, and we sort of did a bit of back and forth. And in the end, I came up with the idea of doing a Christmas wreath with all of these little holly shapes, because I had this cool Christmas AccuQuilt die that has holly and Christmas trees and snowflakes. So I kind of thought about all of those, but landed on the holly and doing a sort of wreath setup.
Okay, so I'm going to use this. It's AccuQuilt die that cuts holly leaves, berries, trees, and snowflakes, but I'm just going to use these two, I think, for this quilt. And the die number is 55043 Holiday Medley. And I will put the link and info for this if you want it in the description. So I think this will be a good way to use some of those different fabrics, and we're going to try and make a wreath. So that's the idea.
Now, Tom at the Colorblind Quilter, who is doing the QuiltMiss challenge with me, he called this next bit cheating, but I don't think it's cheating. Basically, my Canadian elf loves the AccuQuilt. He came for a visit last year, maybe around October, I think, and he was trying to think of ideas for homemade Christmas cards. He likes to make his own Christmas cards, and I showed him the AccuQuilt and said he could use my Christmas scraps to make little circles, and then I think he glued them on to the front of the cards and made like little Christmas baubles on the front of his cards. Anyway, so he used the AccuQuilt when he was here last year, and he loved putting the fabric through and turning the crank. I don't know, gave him a kick. So when I said I was going to do the wreath with this AccuQuilt die, he put his hand up and volunteered. So I put him to work in my kitchen. He cut them all out for me. In fact, he cut me more than I needed.
Here he is, happily elfing away. A couple things to mention. One, I decided to add some red and green fabric as well as the ones that were sent to me from the other quilters, just because I thought it was going to add a little bit more of that Christmassy visual look. So that's where he's getting the red and green that he's cutting. Also, you might notice that the white thing that's on top of the AccuQuilt die is called a cutting mat. And you might notice this one's curving and it looks a bit wrong. Basically, I was a bit of a cheapskate. I didn't buy an AccuQuilt cutting mat that was the same size as this die because I already had one from Blue Wren. So that's an Australian company that I've talked about in my video about my AccuQuilt die collection. They're another company that makes dies that fit in the machine, but their mats are a little bit different, and so they tend to do this curving thing. It's not, the mats don't last forever, so eventually I will buy a proper AccuQuilt mat. But anyway, that's why it's curving.
So he sat there happily with a cup of coffee and cut out all of the holly leaves and little berries from the die. And then once he flew away back to the North Pole or wherever elves go, I was left to then make the quilt.
I used my kids' Paw Patrol Lookout Tower toy to sketch a circle that was roughly the shape I wanted onto the background fabric that I'd pieced from some other leftover fabric. You'll see it closer up later on. And it's just a rough circle, and I was using it as sort of a starting point for where the tips of the holly leaves were going to go to form my wreath. Before I even started on attaching the holly leaves, I quilted the entire background of the quilt top with a kind of what I'm calling a cobblestone square rectangle pebble effect. It's meant to, it kind of looks like a cobblestone wall to me. Apologies that this is fuzzy. My later filming on the long arm is better, but for the background bit, I had the iPad set up badly, and so it looks a bit fuzzy. But anyway, I just wanted to show you briefly what I was doing for this. So basically, I'm just going round rough rectangle and square shapes that are they don't necessarily meet in the same place, and I go around them 2 or 3 times, kind of like you would with pebbles, if you were doing circle pebbles on a long arm or just free motion on your domestic. And I really like this kind of background quilting because it's hard to get it wrong. But also for a wreath, I thought it looks kind of like, a stone wall from a cottage or something like that. So that's the idea of why I went with these kind of square, boxy shapes. And sometimes if they didn't quite fit, as you can see here, I would just make it turn a corner for me, as if I was slotting in, a bit of stone to make up a empty space in a wall. So that's the idea. Okay, so I've now got the quilt top all quilted to look like my cobblestone wall. And now I'm going to have to roll the quilt back to get to where I want to put the wreath leaves. I'm just checking how far I need everything rolled back for me to be able to do this. So. Okay, that seems good. All right, so now what I'm going to do is change this foot. I only had it square foot because that's what I was using the time before, and I didn't take it off for this quilting. But I'm going to change to my micro stitch foot so I can see better the edge of the holly leaves when I go to put them on. And I'm also going to change my top thread because I've got a kind of variegated Christmassy thread. Let me get it. It's this one, which I'm going to use. So it's going to be, I think, mostly red, a bit of green, nice and Christmassy. Bought it a while back, can't even remember what for, so we're going to use it. So I don't always plan things before I do them entirely. So the blue circle, which I forgot to mention earlier, was drawn with basically a washable fabric pen. So that blue mark comes out when I wash the quilt, which I'll do before you receive it if you're the winner. And what I was using the blue circle for was to put the tip of each holly leaf on it. So some would be facing up out of the circle and some down into the circle. And I didn't have a plan at this point when I was attaching this first holly leaf for where the berries were going to go. But sort of quarter of the way through, I figured out what I wanted to do. So I'll show you that in a minute. But basically, all I'm doing is raw edge appliquing or quilting or whatever you want to call it, these holly leaves in place. I'm not using any fusible. So you could, of course, put fusible on the back of your fabric either before you cut the shapes or, probably would make sense to do it before you cut the shapes if you're going to do that. But I've been doing a lot of raw edge applique projects recently with no fusible, because it skips a step, which is one of my favorite things to do. And it spares an expense, which is another one of my favorite things to do. And what I'm doing is sewing around 3 or 4 times around the edge. So it's one, it's secure, and two, you don't have to be precise if you're sewing around 3 or 4 times, because that's when it looks like a design choice. I'm sure you've heard other folks say that before. And then I'm also stitching up the center of the spine, which gives it a little bit more, attaches it that little bit more, and it also gives it that kind of holly look. So I'll show you a few of the, putting on the first few leaves in real time, and then I'm going to speed it up so you can see a bit more how it went. But the only thing I really had to pay attention to, I guess, was how I was spacing the leaves, because obviously the outside of the circle can fit more leaves than the inside of the circle. So there were places where I had to sort of skip a spot for the inside. So when I felt like the leaves were getting a bit crowded, I just didn't put one there. And then the other thing here, so you can see me do it here, and I've did it throughout, was basically in order to not have to cut my threads, because I don't want you to see the traveling stitches in between the holly leaves. So to avoid having to cut my thread for every single leaf, I had them sort of touch or overlap so that I could just jump from one to the other. So I would stitch up to the point where they overlap and then hop over to the other leaf, if that makes sense, because I'm using the same thread throughout. And then, so then I didn't have to cut my thread. And I tried to do the same thing when I started adding the berries a little bit later on as well. So it was just those sorts of things I was thinking about, but otherwise it was fairly improv in terms of which fabric went next to which, or how many leaves were going to fit on the wreath. As I said, my stepfather cut out a lot of holly leaves, and he thought from his estimate that I was going to have to cut more, but as it turned out, I've got way more than I needed. So yeah, once I got into the groove of it, I found it actually quite relaxing. And although the Moxie is, smallish long arm, the throat space isn't huge, just so happened to work out. Again, I didn't plan it. You can actually get quite a bit of a circle done in one pass on the long arm. So I only had to advance it, back and forth a couple of times to get the whole circle covered. This is what I decided to do with the holly berries, was just to put 2 crossing where the 2 holly leaves cross, or if I wasn't putting a holly leaf on the inside, then I would just have the 2 berries at the end of the one leaf on the outside of the circle, if that makes sense. So that again helped me with traveling with my threads. So I would just hop from one leaf to another where they touched each other, because of course holly leaves touch each other on normal wreaths, don't they? So and then that just made it easier to as I said, not have to cut the threads. So I went all the way around with the same technique. And this is what it looked like when I was finished, but I decided it needed a little bit of something. And so I decided to add the words Merry Christmas in the middle. So what you're seeing here is just some printer paper printed out so I could check if I liked how the letters looked. Okay, so a lesson in poor planning. Basically, I want to add Merry Christmas in the middle of that wreath, and I already have this AccuQuilt die that makes lovely easy letters. I've used it before, but it's too big to fit Christmas with this font size across the middle of the wreath, so I can't use it. So if I had planned the size of the wreath and made it a bit bigger, this would have been easier. But anyway, here's a workaround if you don't have this die, basically. So I found a font that I liked on Microsoft Word, basically, and printed it out and put it on top of the quilt to make sure it would fit. I think this was around font size 210 or something like that, but you can experiment obviously with whatever you're making. Now, what I want to do, even though I didn't use fusible for the whole of the holly leaves, I'm going to use fusible for the letters, because I just don't trust myself to get them in the right position while I'm going. So what I need to do, this is just printer paper, just to test the size. So what I need to do is trace it onto some fusible, but of course, if I did that just this way, then once I put the fabric on, I'm going to use this, the letters will be reversed. So I need to reverse the letters first. So there are lots of people who can probably show you how to reverse letters on a computer. I don't want to faff with that. I have this light box that I bought secondhand a long time ago, and I don't use it enough, so I'm going to use it for this. So basically what I need to do is reverse it on here. I did try doing this without the light box, and I couldn't see, because obviously the back of it's not as dark as the front. I couldn't see through. So that's why we're using the light box. So I'm just going to do that. It doesn't really matter if they're next to each other because we're going to cut out the letters separately. But anyway, so then this is the glue side. And this is the bit I can write on. So the glue side is going to go down. And then I can see that and I can trace it. After all the letters are traced out, it's just a case of fusing the fabric to the back, the glue side of your fusible. So obviously follow the directions for whatever fusible you're using. I use all sorts, so just whatever floats your boat really. And then you need to cut out the individual letters. So I did all that and then place them where I wanted them to go on the quilt and iron them in place while it was on the long arm. So I did some rudimentary measuring to try and see if I could get it somewhat straight. I think it's all right, but certainly it's me doing it, so it's never going to be 100% perfect. And then I just used the same technique as I used for the holly leaves, really. So I went round 3 or 4 times, 1 to make sure it was attached, but 2 to give it the same look as the holly leaves. Now for this one, I didn't have any cheats for not breaking threads, so I had to cut threads and start again for every single letter. So that took a little bit longer, but I think it was worth it. I think it adds a little bit of a pop of something to the quilt, so I'm glad I took the time to put that in. So here are the letters a little bit more close up so you can see. And then of course the last job was to bind it. And if you've seen my previous video, I like to add the labels now to my binding before I even start to bind the quilt so that I don't have to hand sew the label on. If you want to see more about how to do that, I've got another video. I'll link to it in the description, but it's pretty easy. So I used the leftovers, as you can probably see, of the Christmas fabric that I received from everybody, the stuff that wasn't cut up into holly leaves, excess holly leaves, for a scrappy binding. So that's the fabric that is binding the quilt, and I just machine bound both front and back because that's how I roll. So, and here's the finished quilt. I have to say, I'm pretty happy with it. This is my first ever Christmas quilt, so a little bit of a shame that I'm giving it away, but I committed to that, so that's fine. I can always make another. And I'm just, yeah, I'm pleased with how it turned out without having too much of a plan and feeling a bit stumped for quite a little while, to be honest. So if you like the look of it, then as I said, you can win it. So the details are all in the description. This is the back, just so you can see what the quilting looked like there.
So I hope you enjoyed seeing the making of my Christmas wreath quilt. And if you would like to have it, then you need to enter the contest, I guess it's called, where basically you need to look through all of the QuiltMiss videos, all 12 of them, and look for the notions that we all point to in them. So you might have seen a little pointy arrow pointing to my notion in this video. So you need to make a note of that, watch all the other 12 videos, and then in the description, there'll be a link to a Google Sheet where you can fill that all out. And then at the end, we're gonna pick winners. Each channel will pick a winner and someone will win the item that they made. So you could win this exact quilt, and good luck. I've got to give a big thanks to Donna from Handmade by Ying with Donna, and Tucker from Tucker Sewing and Quilting, who were big players in organizing this whole thing, and they put a lot of work into it. The next video in the series, so day 9 in the QuiltMiss videos, is Beth at Good Goods. So I'll put her link and everybody's links in the description below. So make sure you go and find that for tomorrow. And you can, and as far as I know, you can enter as many of the channel competitions as you want to increase your chance of winning one of the quilts or one of the Christmassy items that have been made. So I wish you good luck entering that, and happy holidays as well. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, please do subscribe. Hit the bell for notifications. Leave me a comment. Let me know what you thought of the quilt, and I hope to see you next time. Thanks so much for spending time with me. Bye.